Good evening and welcome to tonight's Driver's Ed program. We'll wait for people to sign on in. Boy, everybody's waiting. Good to see the numbers click on right as we start at 7:30. Hopefully everybody had a good day. The few people that I did drive with today did a very good job, so I do have some openings for tomorrow. So once we get everybody on, we'll talk a little bit about what we have for available drive times tomorrow and Friday. I don't think the snow is going to be that bad, and part of driving is driving in all types of weather, so we'll probably drive in an inch or two. It's only the first time out driving, so it'll probably be a good experience to talk a little bit about what to do when you don't see lines and how do you slow down without braking and things like that. So we'll try to schedule up the day. So we are only missing just a few people. Remember, as we said earlier, yesterday, you need to sign in. Okay, this is your attendance. That way, at the end of tonight, I'll be able to take a look who actually signed in at 7:30 and when people signed out. I also want you, if you are part of the YouTube community, by the way, you should subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way, you're going to get a notice indicating that class is starting soon, so you'll never miss a class. Boy, we dropped from 10 people. From 17 people to 11 people. Where did everybody go? So maybe you had to sign in. And also make sure that you put your name on the comment section, so that way when I ask questions, I will be able to see who's here. And if you ask a question, I was able to answer a question last night, because I really don't look at my phone per se, unless I tell you to text in a question or a answer to a question on your phone, because I don't want anybody to see the answer up on the YouTube comment section. So we've got to work both ways. We've got to work the YouTube comments, and we got to do the attendance through the phone. Just because we have just about everybody here now we've got just about everybody. Tomorrow, the only time that I do not have open is 4 o'clock. So tomorrow, the whole day is open. So if you've got like A period, a C period, you want to drive during lunch, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, because you don't have anything on F period, let's try to schedule that out. 3 o'clock, and I may drive from 5 to 6 tomorrow. So if someone wants to drive at 5 to 6, I'll also include that too. So that takes us to tonight's topic. We didn't really get into licensing, so I do want to speak on that a little bit. Oh, I forgot to mention the Facebook again. Some people are still having a difficult time understanding what to do with Facebook. Now, Toll Driving School has a Facebook. I post just general information. That is for my business. Your class, if you are a member of a driver's ed class, I have a special page. Here it is again. I'm gonna put it up on the screen. So there it is down at the bottom. Okay, the bottom of the screen. It says Toll Driving School Remote Driver Education Class. It is a private group. You cannot see it unless you go to the search bar on Facebook and put in Toll Driving School Remote Driver Education Class. Once you click on it, it takes you to the page, and it asks you to join. Once you click to join, I will accept it. That will get you to all the links. So last night, I put a link for a pretest. I want to see what your basic knowledge about driving is. I also put a link for those of you that weren't able to get the material on Saturday. The textbook, Responsible Driving, Chapter 1, is what we're going to be going over tonight. That was included on the Facebook page because you weren't able to read it. because you don't have a textbook. Also, I gave a course outline. Let's see, let me get it out. This thing right here. Okay, you will find your course outline. That will be on the Facebook page. As you start to schedule to drive, I will give you a hard copy. Let me just reach down. I will give you a hard copy so that way you don't have to go to the remote Facebook page to read on your computer screen. You'll actually have a book on your lap or on your desk that you'll be able to thumb through to get all the material that you need. But we've got to schedule a drive time first before you receive the textbook. So tonight, we're going to begin tonight's class talking a little bit about ownership of a vehicle, getting out on the road. What is it going to take to own a vehicle and to register a vehicle and to get a driver's license? And that's why you're here, because in the next month and a half, 2 months, I guess if you have a birthday 3 months down the road, it's going to be a little bit longer for you. But we're going to kind of go briefly over the steps that are needed. And then the second half of class, we're going to go through Chapter 1 in the textbook, which is going to give you an overview of driving in general and about roadways and what makes them safe and unsafe, and what are we doing in the future to make our cars a little bit more reliable and a little bit safer. Because one thing you'll hear in this class is that the main goal is not only to make you a safe driver, but also to be an educated consumer of traffic safety material, which would be buying cars, buying oil for your car, for gasoline, making you educated driver out on the road about what roads you should be on, other roads that you may want to stay away from. So that's all part of being a good educated driver. So let's get into driving. Now, the state will not just give you a license. You've got to prove to the state that you have the specific skills and knowledge base to be a driver. So the state driving test is based on 3 components: your eye test, your written test, and your road test. So there's 3 stages, and you have to go from the first stage to the last stage. At any point, if you do not show the state that you are at a certain skill level or knowledge base, then the test or getting a driver's license is going to stop. Okay, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But I want you to write down in your notes, driving is not a right, it is considered a privilege. And a privilege that is based upon, because you are a minor, your parents have a vital role in you getting your driver's license. They have to sign off on it. And the other thing that most students don't realize is that after you get your license, at any point, if your parents don't think you're getting good grades or that you're fooling around with a crowd that you shouldn't be, your parents can actually notify the state. Even though you've never broken any traffic law, your parents can rescind, take away your privilege to be out on the roadway. You do not become a legal adult till the age of 18. So under the age of 18, your parents still have a lot of control over your license. So don't think, oh, my parents can't ground me. They can tell me that I can't drive the family car, but I can drive my boyfriend's car, my girlfriend's car, my neighbor's car. Not if your parents have contacted the state and told them they do not want to be responsible for you any longer. Your parents can take away your privilege to drive through the state computer system. The state manual that I gave to you, if you've picked it up or if you've downloaded it, it's very, very brief. It's not as extensive as the old manual that we had about 2 years ago. They've cut portions off out of it. I think they've kind of dumbed it down a little bit. I call it the state pamphlet. It's no longer a book or a booklet. It's very short, so any reading that you have to do for me around the state manual is very brief, and that's why we have to kind of dig in a little bit deeper on understanding what they're trying to convey in the paragraph or 2 that they may put in the manual on a particular subject. So make sure you take good notes during this class, because your state exam is going to be more than just knowing the state manual. It's going to be all the information that I'm giving you here through class, through these PowerPoints. It makes sense that, once you get your license, you always want to be a safe driver. So you're going to be practicing safe driving all the time. It's not something that once you get a license, you just don't drive safe anymore, because if you don't, you're going to get a ticket. And in regards to tickets, let's talk about two words here: suspension and revocation. So in your notes, I want you to write down suspension is for a short period of time that your license will be taken away. Usually, let me go through the first 3 violations. And this is in the manual, and we're going to talk about this multiple times throughout class, today's being the first. The first offense, moving violation that you have, will be a 20-day loss of license. Your second moving violation will be for 45, and your third will be for 90 days. So suspension is kind of like a slap on the wrist. You lose your license for 20 days. At the end of 20 days, you pay a reinstatement fee, and you get your license back. Of course, you have to pay your fine. Revocation, on the other hand, that's a little bit longer. That means that you've done something a little bit worse than running a stop sign or speeding 10 miles above the speed limit. Usually revocations come from your serious misdemeanors or felonies, striking a pedestrian. It could be a DWI. It could be transporting illegal drugs. So depending on the penalty, it will be suspension or revocation. So suspension, less amount of time; revocation, more time without a license. And with revocation, because it can go up to a year or more, there could be a chance that you could have to retest written or driving if your license expires during that period. Remember, a good driving personality is related to your attitude. So I want everybody to approach learning here in class to being on time. When we have class at 7:30, be here, be on time. And everybody was on time for their driving today, so I really appreciate that. So it gives me a sense that you're taking this seriously. When people don't hang around for the class, or they pop in or out, that shows me you're not really taking this seriously. And it'll probably show up on your homework. It will show up on your test scores. It will show up eventually when you go for your license, because you're not going to be equipped to do that well. So it does need your full attention behind the wheel as well in class to do well. The manual is very brief, as I said before. The thing I want to mention right here, and this is where listening to me and taking these classes are going to help things out a little bit. So I want to take a moment here and talk about the licensing locations where there are 19. If you are in a hurry to get your driver's license, this is good information. Write this down. You can go to any one of the 19 locations for your driver's license. If Dover or Epping, where most people from the Durham area will go for their driver's license, if they're backed up for a month, you may find an opportunity in Manchester, Tamworth, Nashua, Salem, Keene. If you're willing to drive, if your parents are willing to drive, you may find a place closer. So just remember that when you go online to make your appointment, you will probably be able to choose where you can go. So if it looks like one place is really booked up, switch the location and see if there are more openings closer to your birthday, let's say in Tamworth or Manchester. Once you're online and pay your fee and do your application, when you actually do the driving portion of your driver's test, they're going to need to see 2 forms of ID. So that's original birth certificate and like a social security card, passport, school ID, something. But one has to be your birth certificate, right? That's why I just wanted a copy. I didn't want an original. And I believe there are still some of you that have not sent me either by email or text a picture of your birth certificate or passport. So I need that. So whenever you drive with somebody, New Hampshire does not have a permit system. So the only way that you drive legally with me or with your parents is showing proof of your age. So please do that. Now, will I still drive with you if you didn't send it in to me? I have been known to take my chances. We don't usually get stopped by the police. And if we do, I do have time to go back to the police and show proof of age if I don't have it from you right off. But it just makes things a lot easier, okay? So please send it along after tonight. By the way, I'm closing out the program after tonight. I knew that somebody had a friend that was going to try to join tonight, but I wasn't able to get all the information. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to get up early and send in the information. I wasn't able to send into the state the roster. So once the roster goes into the state, you are in the process of getting your license. So there we go. So let's talk a little bit about the license that you're going to be getting. Your license will be good for 5 years. So every 5 years, you're going to have to go to the state, and you're not going to have to get retested behind the wheel or a written test. The only thing that will be required of you every 5 years is taking an eye test. It's not until you're in your 70s, until the state starts re-examining people to make sure that they're safe and have the mental capacity to still be behind the wheel. So think about it. Once you get your license at age 16 or 17, you're going to probably be going another 55 years or 54 years without ever having to do another test. Isn't that great? It's just going to be go, take an eye test, pay your fee, get another picture. And by the way, write this down. Once you get your driver's license, your next one, you don't even have to show up. You can actually make an application for your license to renew it online. They will still use the same old picture. Okay, so they're just going to keep that. All right, so that's the kind of a cool thing, especially in the COVID time. A lot of people feel like they're going to wait in line, but they don't. This I'm sure you're familiar with if you've got friends or siblings that have had their license. You can't drive with more than one non-relative for your first 6 months. Once that 6 months is over, you can have as many people as you have seatbelts. Now, relatives, on the other hand, if you wanted to drive, you've got 3 cousins that are here visiting, and you've only had your license for about 2 months, you can drive your cousins around. Okay, as long as they're related to you, you can have as many people in the car as there are seatbelts, as long as they're relatives. Non-relatives, you got to watch the first 6 months, being careful that you don't let just anybody in the car drive with you. And usually there's no way that they can tell. It usually comes about when you get stopped for speeding or running a stop sign. Then they may start asking questions like, who's in the back seat? I notice you've only had your license for a short period of time. And they may start asking questions. But for the most part, I think the police aren't going to say, hey, that looks like a car full of, of young people. Let's pull them over. It doesn't have to be a picture, a birth certificate. As long as it's something from the hospital is what I'm looking for. So whatever you got, just send it my way, and it will probably do. You also have a curfew when you drive. Must not drive between the hours of 1 in the morning and 4 in the morning. I think you've all heard the adage from your parents, nothing good happens late at night. So they want you home. They don't want you to be fooling around, speeding around the Hampton Strip in the middle of July at 2 in the morning. So please remember, under the age of 18, this curfew is going to stay in effect. It's not like being the non-relatives. So don't think that the curfew is only for the first 6 months. The curfew goes to the age of 18 till you're an adult. So we've talked about the application. We talked about the fee. Your parents are going to have to sign off on your license. So that's the DSMV 38. You are here for your driver's ed certificate, which I will provide to you. I had 2 people today that received their certificate from the last class. So they took their final last Thursday. They had a few more drive hours. but they completed that today, and they were able to get their paperwork. Your 40-hour log, this is going to be the hang-up for most of you because it's wintertime. And probably you've noticed this already with your parents. Most of the time, they do not like driving at night, in cold, or in bad weather. So if those things are taking place, the chances of you driving to the store or driving to the school or driving to relatives, your parents are going to say, no, not today. We'll do it later. That doesn't help you get your 40 hours. So your best bet is to talk to your parents and say, can we have a designated time, like Saturday or Sunday or Wednesday afternoon, that you can start, substantially getting a lot of driving in. 40 hours is a long time. Let's just say that you've got 20. You've already got 20 done. You've got another 20 to do. If you only did 2 hours a week, it's going to take you 10 weeks. This program is only 6 weeks long. It's going to be another month after you're done. If you don't have 5 hours in, it's going to take you months and months. And hopefully you're not going to forget all the information that we learn here in class or all the techniques that I'm going to give you of how to perform on your driving test behind the wheel. Okay, so, try to get your parents to buy in to this process of making it a substantial amount of drive each week, at least 2. I mean, that's to start with. Of course, in the summer times, it's easy. Winter's always a lot more difficult. I'm going to kind of go through the Real ID kind of fast here. It is coming up this fall where the federal government is making all states, so it's just not New Hampshire, to meet certain requirements for use of identification to get on airlines and to get into federal facilities. So every state is now going to a uniform ID system. So right now you can, no, driving with, that's a good question. Someone just asked, does driving with me count? It does not. Okay, it does not. Technically, all right? It's supposed to be 10 hours with me, 40 hours with your parents. I never look at the 40-hour log, so whether you put it down and you hope that they just don't check it, I have no idea how they're going to handle that. But I do know that for the most part, they want it to be 2 separate things because it has to be signed. And I can't sign your 40-hour log. Your parents have to initial it. So here's a picture of a Real ID. It's that yellow circle with the white star in the middle or top right corner. That is what the Real ID. So when you go to a federal building or an airline and they're going to say, I need proof of who you are. Could you show me your license? You take out your license. You've got the top one. No problems getting onto your flight. You show the bottom one. Come fall after October 21st, they probably will not let you on the plane. Now, I'm sure when you buy your ticket, it's going to remind you in order to board, make sure that you have your proper identification, which is the Real ID. But I just wanted to put this in your ear because now that you're going to be getting your license, it's not like you have to wait to the 21st. This is something that you can actually do when you make an application for your license. Okay, and why is it different? It's a little bit more questions to answer. They may need more than just the 2 IDs. So when you do the application online, they may tell you additional information that's going to be needed. But I would probably think about doing this process. I wouldn't want to get my license, let's say in May, and then have to go, in October again to get another license to change it out. I'd get it all done right now. So kind of look into that. And I'll try to get more information on that too. I think you all know the requirements, so we're not going to go over this. Just make sure that your parents are in the front seat. They are paying attention. So you can drive with anybody that's 25 years of age. Could be an uncle, could be a neighbor, it could be a grandparent. But you have to stay within the borders of the state of New Hampshire. Okay, legally, you can only drive at 15 and a half, proof of age in New Hampshire. Once you go into Massachusetts or Maine, you have to obey by their law. In both Maine and Massachusetts, because we're bordering both those states, They have a permit system for their young driver, and you don't have a permit. You just have proof of age, so you can't legally drive in those states. When your parents are watching you drive, they should be paying attention to what you're doing. They should not be on their phone. They should not be reading a paper. They shouldn't be falling asleep because you may need their help. Now, you may be a good driver. You may know how to get to your grandparents' house, which is 20 minutes away. But if the light changes or a car crosses over the yellow line, you may need a little bit of help of how to handle the situation. And if they're not paying attention, you're basically left on your own, and you're more apt to probably make a bad decision. And we don't want that to happen. We talked about the two forms of ID. Make sure your vehicle that, oh, by the way, most people forget this because we do cover this right now. I had someone from my last class, we were almost done driving. They said, so what kind of car am I going to be driving for my driver's test? I go, what do you mean, what kind of car? Well, what kind of car does the state have for you to take your driver's test in? I go, you don't take a state driver's test in their car. You bring your own. They go, you do? I go, yeah. We covered our second class. And they go, oh, I forgot. So bring a car that you're familiar with. Bring a car that you are comfortable with the gas and the brake and the steering. I would not bring, an uncle's car or a grandparent's car that you've never driven before, because you may mess up. You may be hitting the brake and you're not hitting it hard enough, and you overshoot your stop line by 2 feet. And, you could fail for that. Or you're on the gas pedal and you're just going too fast or too slow. So take a car that you've been using for your 40 hours. That's the best way to approach that. Here's the testing site in Dover. I don't have pictures for everyone that's around the state. This is the one that more than likely everybody's going to be going to. This is what's going to happen. You're going to walk in, or actually now it's going to be a little bit different. I had this PowerPoint a year ago when we were actually showing up. You're going to have a date and time to show up. Here it used to be you have to go to a desk and they give you a number of when you're going to be taking your test. Now, if they say your test is going to be at 10:20, show up 15 minutes before your test, you're arriving at 10 o'clock. You're going to go up to somebody who's probably outside or right inside the front door and say, I'm here for my driver's appointment. They're going to say, fine, go to your car, wait in the car, and they'll be out to test you in a moment. If it's for the written test, they will direct you to a side room where there are a computer system, and we're going to take a look at that computer system in a moment to take your written test. But it's going to be all planned out. So just have all your paperwork, have your fees, your IDs, everything, and realize that it's going to be for only a short, specific part of the day. No longer is it waiting. It's going to relatively probably be less than an hour going in and doing the written or going in and doing the driving. Before, it used to be you could be there an hour and a half, 2 hours waiting between the written test and the driving test. But it's much better. The reason why I've got down rest, dressed, and clean is that you're going to be judged accordingly to the way that you look and your car looks and smells, because we're all into making first impressions, right? The minute you get to meet me and I get to meet you, you're looking at me and I'm looking at you, and I'm taking you out to drive. The first 5 minutes, I'm making some type of an assessment. Well, it looks like they've got good hand position. Okay, they're looking in their mirror. They're positioned on the road. We make first impressions. So what I'm trying to say here is that every moment that you're with somebody during your driving test, treat them with respect, be kind, look people in the eye, ask good questions. You're going to be nervous, and I think by talking to people, it will hopefully break the ice. But there's nothing going to, probably aggravate people that are testing you if they get into a dirty car and you've got yesterday's McDonald's lunch on the floor and they have to push it aside once they get in the car. So, clean the car up a little bit. Make it smell good a little bit. I think it will just kind of help you. Well, make it where you automatically pass? No. But at least it's going to start the testing off on a good foot rather than on a bad foot. Here's the 3 parts of the test. So let me talk about the eye test first. The eye test, 20/30 in one eye, 20/40 in both. So write that down. You need to know that. I will test you on that probably. If you have bad eyes, one of the things that I don't think let's see if I still have it here on my desktop. One of the things the state used to make me do was an eye test. I used to have you read an eye test. I don't know if I still have it. I don't see where I have it around. I'll have to dig it up for tomorrow's class. But I used to have it right on the main screen right here. Get your eyes checked. I'm getting mine done in March. I still have a year to go before my license is renewed, but just looking at the computer screen, I can tell that my eyes, especially close up, are getting just a little bit blurry. My near sight is fine, but I don't want any hassles when I go for my driver's test. And by the way, like I said earlier, I don't have to take a written test or road test anymore. I just go and do my eye test. Even though I'm a driving instructor, okay, I still have to go through the same process that you have to go through. So once you pass through the eye test, which should be the easiest part of getting your license, they're going to sit you in a room and they're going to have you do a written test on a computer. So let's take a look at the test. It is 40 questions. It is a touchscreen like an iPad, and you're going to log in with your birth date, and then they're going to give you a sample question so you can just get a feel of what it's like, and then they're going to start you off on the test. Now, the test is built upon the state manual that you should have a copy of. It's going to be on what I'm teaching, some of the classes that I have. It's going to be a little bit about the textbook. Okay, so the textbooks are going to cover some things that we just don't have in the manual. So it's going to be important to do all your reading. And then some of it is just going to be plain driving situations. Like you are car A, car B is coming towards you, making a left-hand turn at a 4-way intersection. You both arrive at the same time. Who has to yield the right of way? So they're going to put you in a driving situation, and they're going to try to figure out, do you know who gets to go when? All right? So you could have some questions like that. Let me show you the computer test. I went to a conference, and I actually took this picture, and I asked the DMV, do you mind if I videotape this driving instructor? This guy teaches driver's ed over in Merrimack, New Hampshire, and he was the guinea pig, so he was going to do some questions. So they allowed me to film it, and I think I did about 5 minutes worth of dialogue, and they're going to explain a little bit about the test. So we're going to let the state talk about the written test.
As you notice, there's a volume. There's a volume here on the right. We also have headphones that plug in. Everybody gather around. You can come stand back here as well if you can't see. And what it's going to do is it walks you through each individual screen, kind of prompts you to the next screen. It's pretty self-explanatory. Hit continue, go on to the next one. And what it does is it gives you 4 dates of birth.
Do you know which one it is?
No, I don't actually. You have to pick your date of birth to continue. So when you walk into our test room and you see 5 test stations, well, how do I know which one is mine? Well, number one.
I'll be right back. Jay O'Leary.
Still, I can get
What was that?
April 6th, 94.
Okay.
694, that'd be the bottom.
Thank you.
It tells you at the beginning that it's a 40-question test and that you need to get 32 to pass.
Is every question based on the manual?
No, it is not. There are a couple of questions in there that are required in your curriculum that are in there that aren't in the manual.
And I know that Trooper O'Leary had stated that he had mentioned this to you folks in there, but we are getting some calls from people saying, this wasn't in the manual when they have just been to driver's ed. And And so it's very important that you folks know that it's not just the manual that they're tested on, it's your curriculum. So that is very important
And
that you
those
impart that
complaints are
information to your people.
extremely few and far between, so it's not like it's an issue. It's just something that actually cropped up recently.
Do a sample test.
Yep, what you do is at the beginning of the test here, it gives you a choice, a sample test or begin test. The sample test, all that does is show you how the computer system works. So you go ahead and hit sample test. There we go. It shows you a picture of a horse and asks you what it is. Pretty simple.
Go with C.
Here's a great part about this test. When you pick an answer, it's going to ask you to confirm that answer.
You didn't tap it.
So there is absolutely no way you can come back and say, hey, listen, I hit C and A came out.
If I didn't like that answer,
You could hit no.
Yep, we're good.
There you go.
This might have to be recalibrated. We haven't used it that
This
much,
one
but
hasn't been used in a couple
so,
months.
but it is, the touch screen is usually instant.
Takes a second to catch up. That'll ask you to confirm your answer. Is that correct? And at this point, because it's just a sample, it's not going to tell you if you got it right or wrong. It's just so that you know where to touch the screen and what pressure to use, things like that. Go ahead, begin test.
Okay, take his license away.
Yep, it's good.
You know where that is.
What about the volume? Oh, here it is.
Unauthorized area and building beyond.
It's going to ask you to confirm your answer.
It's like a big warehouse.
Behind 33.
Yeah, on the left-hand side, you drive down the road. You have to down the road between the old
Probably has to be it hasn't been used as well. Yep, it recognized it. It'll just take a second.
Explain to me.
But as you go, it'll have your time at the bottom, and there's a lot of great features that were built in with this system. Number one, the quick pass fail, like I said, when you get to the point where you no longer need to continue whether you're passing or failing, it'll let you know. Skipping the question portion, if the power goes out, here's a great question. When this system stops, and we've had it happen a couple times already, it stops the time, stops you at that question. When the power comes back on, you go back to your machine and you start with the date of birth all over again, and then as soon as you select the first question you left on, the time starts up again. And we've been doing this since, we've had this system implemented here since April, and I think we've had maybe 3 people time out on tests. It doesn't happen very often.
Can we videotape the whole thing so that you can have 30 of the questions?
Yeah. Could we do that? All what, 2,000 different tests that you have?
You forget the time.
My students need all the help they can get, Jake. Come on. You know what it was like, Jake. Come on.
I'm just afraid Gordon's going to end up by
It
losing his
recognizes
license.
it's just going
well,
really
how do you
slow.
know it recognizes?
Because you can see the yes change.
Oh, I see.
Yep, it depresses it.
This side, please.
This is what they call a computer.
But you see, this
This is
test
not an
offers a lot
abacus.
more
I usually
visual aid than the
ball
written
across
than the paper test did.
No parking.
Hey, what do you do in your own time?
Gives you the option to enlarge the picture so you can see it. If you actually touch any portion of the lettering on the screen, it makes that bigger as well.
For the visually impaired.
Right. So if you can't see
So you get an idea of what the test is like. If you did the pre-test last night, it's really close to that. Okay, it's really close. It's multiple choice. Some of it, even right now, you should be able to answer the questions. And a lot of people last night did pretty good on the pre-test. So I was trying to give you an idea through the pre-test of what it's going to be like for your actual computer test. 10 are going to be signs. You could see the last one was a do not enter sign. I think you should be able to answer that right now. I would probably say out of a class this size, I would probably bet 3/4 of you already knew what that sign was. You were able to match up the meaning with the symbol. A couple things I want to just to touch upon that they went over real quickly with is that to get an 80%, you need to answer 32 correct. So out of 40 questions, you can miss 8. The minute you miss 9 questions, regardless of where you are on the test, let's say you get to question 25 and that's your 9th one wrong, the test ends. Same thing. You can get to question 32. The minute number 32 and you've got all of them right up to that point, you don't get the next 8 questions. You've already got your 80%. My son was the last child that I had go for their driver's license, and he only got up to question 34. He only missed 2 questions. So it doesn't take that long. A 40-question test, the average person is doing it in less than 15 minutes. So coming out of driver's ed, you're getting all the information that you should be able to look at those questions and figure it out relatively quickly. So if you do not pass the written test, it's because you didn't study or you didn't pay attention in driver's ed. Because if you're coming out of a driver's ed program, my test, I'll tell you right now, my test, my midterm and my final, twice as hard as the state test. So you're going to be well prepared coming out of my program to take the written test. Very rarely do I have people or hear from people that I will tell you this: if you have a hard time with my test and then you have to do a makeup test and you barely make it through, yeah, sometimes people will go and fail. But if you do well on my test, you're going to do well on the state test. You can skip questions. You can know what questions you got wrong because it answers the question right at the bottom. So you're going to know right off which ones you were getting wrong, which ones you were getting right. I just don't think it's going to be that big of a hurdle for you to get over. The other nice thing is that if you have headphones and you'd rather have questions read to you rather than read because you may have dyslexia, you have other type of reading comprehension problems, they'll work with you. They'll actually allow you to use headphones and they'll explain things. So don't go into the test and just try to fake it in trying to answer the questions when you're having a hard time with basic comprehension. So you may know the material, but you're just having a hard time processing the questions. Now, for the driving part, this is what they do. They send you out after you complete the written test, and they say, go out in your car and take that little placard that's off to the right where it says no before you go. They say hang it from your rearview mirror, and then they're going to come out and get into the car with the test sheet, which is to the left. They have that on a clipboard, and they take you out, and they start to evaluate your driving. So let's take a look at what they say. It says you will be tested on your ability to maintain your position within your lane, your ability to keep a safe interval both front and back of your vehicle, so that's following distance, the ability to change lanes, giving adequate warning to other drivers defined as 3 to 4 seconds, correct signal use, presetting them upon completion of a lane change. You will encounter stop signs, traffic lights, pedestrians, emergency vehicles. You will be turning left and right. The examiner will ask you to perform at least one parking maneuver. It will only take you 15 to 20 minutes long. That's it. Your whole driver's license is going to be based upon a 15, 20-minute performance. Like we said earlier, you're going to put your best foot forward. You don't want them to start marking you off. So let's take a look at the sheet. And we're going to just go over this real quickly. So under skill, these are the categories that they could grade you on. Starting the vehicle, visual observation, steering, braking, signals, engine control if you bring a manual transmission. We're going to talk about manual transmissions tomorrow. Left and right turns, speed control, following distance, signs, signals, pavement markings, giving the right of way, parking, and lane usage. All right? So those are all categories. Now they have columns. The columns are needs improvement. That's usually 1, 3, or 5 points. Those aren't bad. Okay? That's how you want them to grade you. Usually you just want them to say, yeah, you just need to get just a little bit better on this. Once they start getting to the middle category, poor, those are 5s and 10s. Now remember, you can only have 20 points deducted. Once 21 points are deducted, your test ends, just like the written test. Now the far right column are all areas where you can automatically fail for one thing. One thing. Any area that's blacked out right there, you cannot fail. They can't fail you for your in-vehicle checks. And those of you that drove today with me, you know that we looked at the gas gauge. We looked at where the hazard lights are and everything. So we did some checking inside our vehicle. Head checks, mirror checks, they can't fail you for, but they can mark you off on. Gripping the wheel and smoothness, they can't fail you. Brake cover and how smooth you brake. So those of you that I told you go a little bit slower for your turns, this is where you're going to have to do that. Signals, they can't fail you for not using your signal, but they can mark you off for 5 points. The other thing that I kind of went over real quick was speed control, and I didn't talk about this yesterday, so I want to talk about it right now. Am I going to make you, when you drive with me, go to the perfect number of speed? So if it says 35, I am going to hold you to that standard of 35. No 37s, no 33s. I'm going to be in your ear faster, faster, slower, slower until you're perfect, perfect all the time. No, I'm not. Okay, this is what I want you to write down in your notes so you will understand how I'm going to allow you to drive with me. Okay, I want you to try to go the speed limit. Okay, I want you to go the speed limit. Not too fast, not too slow. I will give you a little bit of leeway going above, up to about 5. I'll give you a little bit of leeway going below, up to 5, before I start to prompt you, okay, watch your speed, go faster. Watch your speed, go a little bit slower, okay? But if it's a nice day like today was, and we're going down a hill and it's a 40 zone, and you're going 44, and there's nobody in front of us, I'm not going to say anything. Now, if I know that we're going 42, 44, it looks like we're going 45, 46, I'm going to say, okay, careful, careful. Okay, watch your speed, coast. But on your driving test, they want you to go pretty close like I'm going to make you do. I had a student that told me that they got marked off 2 weeks ago for going 50 in a 55 in Newington on their driving test. They got marked off for going 5 below. And I think it's because traffic was going so fast and they weren't able to make lane changes, keeping up with the flow of traffic. So if your slow speed is creating problems with you making a lane change, then they're going to probably mark you off. But if it's a nice day, nobody's around, you're going 50 and a 55, they're going to probably let it go. So just be aware, okay, what is my speed limit on this road? What is my speed limit that I'm going? And then try to do that. If they flip over the form, that's where it's automatic failure, okay? I have taken UNH students for their driver's test because they didn't have a car to use. So they rented out the driver's ed vehicle. And I had a individual probably about 3-4 years ago. It's the shortest test I've ever seen in my life. I was waiting outside. They got into the car with the inspector. They backed out of the parking spot. They went to the stop sign at the parking lot at the DMV. They pulled out from the parking lot, but they pulled out in front of a car too closely. And the inspector failed them on the spot. They didn't go 200 feet. From the time they moved the car to the time they pulled out from the stop sign, they didn't go 200 feet and they failed the test. Things like that can happen. So if you do something really bad, like pull out in front of somebody when you should have waited, they're going to end the test. So his test lasted from the time that he got in the car to the time he got out was probably 3 minutes. Okay, so, think about what you're doing. Think about what you're doing. You're getting an operator's driver's license, so it's a Class D, allows you to operate a vehicle up to 26,000 pounds. We'll be talking about motorcycle licenses, but the others here you probably don't even really need to know. Just know that a motorcycle license, they only do testing between April and October. We do have a section at the end of the program about motorcycles and large trucks and bicycles, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. This next one I do want you to be familiar with because we just talked about taking an eye test. You should know that if you need glasses, which I do, I have to drive all the time with my glasses on. So I have a B on my license. If I get caught driving without my glasses on, I will be cited for breaking this restriction. The other restrictions, just know that people have different ailments and physical limitations, so they may have a mechanical aid, prosthetic aid, outside mirror. All these have designations. The only one that I really want you to be familiar with is corrective lenses, which is B, and the last one is the ignition interlock device, and that's for people that have a problem with drinking and driving. So if you ever get stopped for drunk driving, one of the stipulations of getting your license back will probably be having this installed in your car. So I just wanted you to be familiar that there are going to be some hurdles to get over to get your license back for drinking and driving. And we're going to spend a whole class and a half dealing with drugs and alcohol and what are some of the negative aspects of what's going to happen when you get stopped, and what does it do to your mind and your body and your capabilities of driving a car. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Your license, as we said, runs out in 5 years. The expiration is shown on your license, and it's going to cost $50. It's been that way for a while. It may go up in years to come, but for right now, it's good for 5 years. It's $50. So about a couple months before it expires, you'll be sent a reminder in the mail. Now, the thing here is where you're going to be in 5 years. Okay, most of you probably won't be at home. You're going to be in college, or you've got your own apartment and you're working. So make sure the state has a valid license address. It's your responsibility to renew. And by the way, if you get caught driving on an expired license, they may cuff you. They may put you in handcuffs and put you in the cruiser and tow your car. So that's one thing you don't want to be driving without a valid license. So make sure that doesn't happen. License and registration, you keep your license in your wallet or in your purse if you're a female, and your registration is kept in the glove compartment. Okay, we're going to talk about title of a vehicle and registration at a different point. I want to get into the chapter that I wanted you to drive. So I may come back to this at another point, but I'm not going to really cover this right now. So let's kind of get into chapter 1. And let's talk about the HTS. I think I'm one slide ahead of myself. So I want you to write down HTS stands for Highway Transportation System. Okay, HTS, Highway Transportation System. So let's talk a little bit about the history of driving, just real brief. Cars have only been around for about 100 years. And when we first started to drive, it was only in metropolitan areas. So think of Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Detroit. You weren't seeing cars in like Conway, New Hampshire, Concord, New Hampshire. We're too small. We didn't have any dealerships. Nobody was selling cars. So back in the early 1900s, notice 23,000 vehicles out on the road, but there were 17 million horses to get people around. And if you take a look at the picture, there is a picture of a horse, a guy on the right. He's in a horse-drawn cart on a main street, and it looks like New York City. So you're sharing the road cars with horses. But nowadays, we've got so many drivers out on the road. Actually, there are more cars registered than there are licensed drivers because people own 2 or 3 cars. They've got a truck to go to the dump. They've got a sports car for the summer. They've got an SUV for all the big family. And then I've got my work car. So people have multiple cars, but it wasn't always that way. I come from a family of car dealers. Here in Rochester, my grandfather had a dealership. He sold Cadillacs and Oldsmobiles. And back when he started the dealership back in the 40s and 50s, usually it was the dad that had the car. Mom stayed home. She wasn't in the workforce. Teenagers that went to school had to get to school some other way. They didn't have their own vehicle. Most people paid for the car in full, or they took out a loan that would take them forever to pay. And the car was used for work, and it really wasn't for driving to the beach on a Saturday. It had a purpose. It wasn't where they were driving multiple hours during the week, because they were always concerned that the vehicle will break down and cost too much to get fixed. And you usually bought your vehicles local. Nowadays, we can go to Craigslist, we can go online and purchase a car online and have it shipped to us, which is kind of ironic. Back when my grandfather was selling cars, you could buy a brand new car for $3,400. Now, I went online and I looked at that same car. If you've got that same car and you've got low miles on it and you've kept it restored, no rust and things like that, I've seen this car go for like $20,000, $30,000, 10 times the amount that you would have purchased for it. And this was in 1969. So this car is 50 years old. Okay. The cost of vehicles have gone up substantially. Okay. Now when we think of, and this was a performance vehicle, you could tell by the wheels, the kind of a look, it kind of looks like a muscle car. Okay. Nowadays we're looking at electric cars, and high-speed performance vehicles are costing tens of thousands of dollars. The big auto dealer now that's always in the news is Tesla. Okay, Tesla seems to be the highest car company, at least stock price, where in sales of recent years. And to buy a base model, $80,000. That's not pocket change. Okay, a lot of people have to work pretty hard to earn enough money to buy a Tesla. And a performance model, $100,000 or plus. And of course, I think we're all familiar with high performance vehicles like Porsche and Mercedes and things like that are going to cost a lot more than $100,000. But that's not for the regular driver. So you're going to be driving something off the lot from a Toyota dealership or Ford or Dodge or whatever. Most cars now you're going to probably purchase between $18,000 and $35,000. So 18 probably for your smaller subcompact cars, and then probably family sedans and small SUVs around 35, and then trucks maybe a little bit more than that. But we've got to start thinking. You're pretty young. What is your future going to be like? Are you going to actually need to learn how to drive? Will your kids have to learn how to drive? Or will they just kind of get into a self-automated vehicle? You put in your destination, and their car takes you that spot. We are very close to that. We do have vehicles now that allows you to take your hands off the wheel, and it will actually guide you down the road. Once it starts to sway, then your hands have to come back on and help it. But we are so close to having self-automated cars. Let's take a look at this little video here describing what our future is going to be like.
This is Volvo's 360C concept car, and it's just one idea of what completely driverless cars might look like one day. That means cars without even a steering wheel that can safely navigate public roads entirely on their own. But with how much we hear about self-driving technology making its way into everyday cars, it's hard not to wonder, how much longer do we have to wait? Understanding just how far we've come with self-driving technology can be a bit tricky. To help define how sophisticated the automated technology actually is, the Society of Automotive Engineers classifies these systems using 5 levels. Level 1 is driver assistance, where the vehicle is able to control steering or braking, but not both simultaneously. Level 2 is partial automation, where the car can assist with both steering and braking simultaneously, but your attention is required on the road at all times. Both Tesla's Autopilot and General Motors' Super Cruise are examples of this. Level 3 is conditional automation, where certain circumstances allow the car to handle most aspects of driving, and the driver has the ability to temporarily take their eyes off the road. Level 4 is high automation, where In the right conditions, the car can take full control, giving the driver a chance to focus on other tasks. And level 5 is full automation. In this hypothetical situation, the car drives you, and there isn't even a steering wheel. So what level are we currently at? Most experts would agree, somewhere between levels 2 and 3. However, one of their biggest concerns is the public's misconception that we're much further along.
There's an incredible amount of confusion in the general public around the context of self-driving. In our survey data here, 23% of respondents believe that a self-driving vehicle is available for purchase today. And a lot of that has to do with statements by Elon Musk and others talking about the driverless capabilities and the self-driving capabilities of vehicles. These are systems that are made to assist the driver under the supervision of a driver.
So, is it simply the limits of these automated systems that's holding us back? Actually, there are a number of other factors in the way. For starters, our roads. Simply put, many roads, especially in the United States, are too much of a mess to support cars that can drive by themselves.
So while many individuals out there are really working on the development of self-reliant automation, in essence, a robot that's fully capable of making its own decisions in today's infrastructure, the reality is today's infrastructure is not well equipped for autonomy. In essence, potholes, poor lane markings, and all the other crumbling aspects of our nation's infrastructure aren't going to support high-tech well.
In addition to more public roads needing signs and lane markings that self-driving cars can clearly make out, vehicles need to be wirelessly connected with that traffic infrastructure, as well as one another, in order to interact with the world around them flawlessly. Fortunately, automakers like Volvo already have technology that allows their cars to communicate with each other and alert drivers of hazards via a cloud-based network. This type of connected technology is being tested even further within driverless cars at M-City, a 32-acre mock city and testing facility at the University of Michigan.
So what are connected vehicles? When we say connected at M-City, we're really referring not to streaming Netflix into your passenger seat so much. That's a pretty solved problem in industry. But in how vehicles and infrastructure can be connected together for lots of other benefits like safety. The idea is a low latency way for vehicles to tell other vehicles and anything else that wants to listen where they are and where they're going.
So, once traffic infrastructure and communication is handled, what else do we need to address? Well, traffic laws. Governments have a number of important decisions to make in society's transition to self-driving vehicles. In the beginning stages, they'll have to define what weather conditions are appropriate for vehicles to be operating fully autonomously. This is due to the fact that many of these car systems can be disrupted by rain and snow. One industry they could look to for guidance is the airline industry, who doesn't hesitate to cancel flights in inclement weather. They'll also have to initially find a way for autonomous vehicles to safely navigate public roads amongst traditional cars. A possible solution could be designated lanes, similar to the high occupancy vehicle lanes found on highways and bus lanes found in certain cities.
The government's kind of leaving it up to states to decide what's going on, just because the technology's so new and they still don't really understand what it's going to look like in the end. Once the government does fully involve the federal government, they're gonna have to speak to lobbyists, people that represent truck drivers and taxi commissions. They're gonna realize that a lot of jobs could be lost, and that's gonna be difficult. And then also liability. If these cars are on the roads and they're getting into accidents, like who is liable?
With all these things considered, back to our original question: how soon until we have self-driving cars?
I'd say within the decade, it's gonna be on highways, but if we're talking about being able to take your car wherever you want across the United States, being able to travel through New York City and sleep the whole time, I don't think we're anywhere close to that. Probably several decades away from that.
Car makers and tech companies are very heavily focused on the context of driverless technologies. Now, I'm not saying that that's not the future. It is the future. But as many have begun to admit publicly, that future is further away than anybody's realistically considered to date. We as humans are really good at predicting the future. We're not so good at the timelines. And the timelines to driverless technologies changing how I live and move is probably in the order of several decades, if not further away.
How close are we to the Jetsons car? We're still a ways away, in my opinion. It isn't really a matter of when these technologies will arrive to me, but can we be ready? and utilize them in the best way possible.
I think we're a little bit closer than they are stating, and of course this video is just a little bit old. It's probably 5 or 6 years old. So technologies is going at a rapid speed because stockholders want this technology out there, so they want to see their investment, and we need to be innovative. We need to be green because fossil fuels won't be around forever. So we are trying to move in this direction as quickly as we possibly can, but to be safe. The biggest thing is, can we get enough people to buy into it and also to afford it? But I do think you're going to be finding cars that you're going to be driving in the next 5-10 years much different than what you're driving right now. So I thought this was pretty interesting. And I saw a piece on 60 Minutes probably almost a year ago about semi-tractor trailer trucks. Think about that. Self-driven, not self-driven, but automated tractor trailer trucks taking cargo across the country. No longer are we going to have truck drivers. We're going to have self-automated delivery trucks. That is insane. Okay, so you're going to be looking down the road, and there's going to be a truck coming right at you, and there's going to be nobody behind the windshield. So those are things that we need to be thinking about. So the interstate system was basically conceived in the 50s when we knew that we were getting more people buying cars and the roads were bottlenecking because we didn't have enough roads to handle all the volume of traffic. So we had to come up with a system. So President Eisenhower came up with the interstate system, which runs north, south, east, west through the whole country. It's like a grid. And one thing we're going to learn in class is that the interstate system, if you go north, the numbers are odd number, like 95, which goes from New Hampshire to Massachusetts. When you head east-west, like Interstate 80, Interstate 40, it goes across the country on the east-west direction. So it's all based on a grid and numbers. So from the east to the west, the numbers get smaller. When you go from the south to the north, the numbers get higher. So all this information is readily available if people just take the time to understand how the systems. But now we have GPS, and we've figured out, why do I need to know the mapping system of the United States? And it's costly. The reason why we still have tolls is to maintain, to make sure the roads are kept clear of snow and the repairs are done so we don't break axles and have flat tires. But most things that deal with construction, there's always going to be an override, and things are a lot more expensive than we initially thought. So that's why we don't do away with toll booths, because there's always another project that has to be done. And the one that I just found in the paper not too long ago, so this is just 2 years old, was the Sarah Milford Long Bridge that connects Portsmouth to Kittery. Okay, that's a lot of money, $181 million bridge. Okay, this is why we have to pay a toll, is to upkeep stuff like this. The two biggest problems that we have about the highway is getting to where we want to go safely and not to consume too much oil, and that's going to also create more pollution. So it's a big headache. Okay, we want people to drive, we want people to be safe, but we also don't want to ruin the economy or ruin the environment. So it's kind of a catch-22. Now, this I do want you to write down. I do want you to have a basic understanding of what makes up the HTS. There are 3 categories that I will test you on. The first one is people. The second is vehicles. And the third is roadways. So people, vehicles, roadways. Those are the 3 components to the HTS. So let's talk about people. When we think about driving, we think about being 16 years old, getting a license and driving. But I want you to start thinking, when we think about roadways, we also have to think about young children that are on bicycles, that are pedestrians. So when I say physical skills and mental skills are different, they are. Because a young 3-year-old running out into the road after a pet, that is gotten away, broken away from a leash, a dog. A young kid doesn't want the dog to get hit, so the kid runs after the dog. The dog runs out in the road, and then the kid runs right after it. And both of them aren't probably thinking about, how fast is the car coming towards me. So when you're driving, you've got to think not only of the cars that are in front of you, behind you, and beside you, but you've got to think about bicycles, skateboarders, rollerbladers, anybody that's near the roadway becomes a concern to you as a driver. So that leads us right into the topic of vehicles. And why is this a big concern? The biggest one is that not every vehicle reacts the same way. A tractor trailer cannot speed up the same as a sports car. A motorcycle can stop a lot quicker than a van. So all these things, so I want you to write down in your notes under vehicles, the size, meaning the length and the width, and the capabilities with speed and braking capabilities will affect the way that you look at other cars. Because it would be foolish for you to pull out in front of a large truck that isn't able to stop very well. It'd be foolish of you to make a lane change in front of a Maserati that's speeding on the left side of the road. He's coming much faster than what you picked up in your mirrors. You may think it's clear, but he's going to be right on your back end before you know it. So you've got to see and know what vehicles can and can't do. And I've got a long list of vehicles. And some of them we don't even have listed here. I usually like making this a group activity. This is where we go around the room and we try to list different types of vehicles that we may find on the roadway. So these are some of the most common ones that we think of. But let's think of some other ones like ambulance, fire truck, police car, dump truck, mail truck, a Pepsi truck, an Uber car or Lyft, a taxi, a utility vehicle, a logging truck. All these different vehicles have different shapes, sizes, blind spots. Okay, they're all different. They're all different. Some of them take up a good portion of the road. Some of them are really, really tiny, like smart cars and Mini Coopers. So we've got to start thinking, why would you park in between two large vehicles? Because when you try to get out from your parking spot, you're not going to be able to see. Whereas you could have parked maybe further up in the parking lot when you're going to be next to another car the same size as you, and you can look through their windows to see if there's any cars, coming when you try to back out of a parking spot. But yet when we think about parking, we go, I'll just take that parking spot. You don't even think about what it's going to be like trying to get out of that parking spot. So think about the size of the vehicle, how well you're going to be able to see when you're doing certain things. And that's going to help you. It's going to help you be a better driver. And then the last thing that I said about the HTS is the roadways. Some roadways are narrow, like downtown Portsmouth, because think about it. If you've ever been to Strawberry Bank, down to Prescott Park, that area was built for horse and carriage. All those roads used to be cobblestone. They weren't built for cars. So now that we've paved over them or we're riding over cobblestone, it's not the same width that you would have on I-95. I-95 is going to be at least 3 feet wider than what you've got for a lane width. Because on 95, you've got tractor trailers that are flying by on either side of you. You don't see a tractor trailer going through Strawberry Bank. They're prohibited from doing it because they can't maneuver those tight corners. So those large trucks can't drive in that area. But think about it. If you had your license and you helping a friend move and you put a moving truck, which is not a tractor trailer, I understand that, but it's longer than a van. Some of these U-Haul trucks cannot maneuver the Portsmouth streets very well. So you've got to think about the vehicle I'm driving, the width, the length, what are the roadways like? And think about dirt and pavement. Are you going to get the same type of traction on dirt as you do on pavement? Of course not. Are you going to have the same type of traction on a snow-covered road, ice, rain? All these things you've got to think, okay, my driving today is different because of the weather. And all of a sudden you're going to start changing your mindset when you get behind the wheel of the car. Now, we have to have laws, and, part of it, the only way you can get a driver's license is if you pass, like we said tonight, the test. So we have a federal, state, and local requirements for people driving. And we have laws that if you do not follow these, you will be prosecuted. So we have local traffic courts. We have state police. We have local police. We have federal government aid for our roadways. They help build that Sarah Sullivan Bridge, whatever the name of that bridge that I talked about earlier tonight. That was federal money, okay, that was collected and came back to the states. So there's a lot of time and effort behind driving. So, in your lifetime, think about it. Other than buying a home and your college education, your next highest expense in your lifetime, it could be higher than maybe some colleges, actually, when you think about it. Driving a vehicle is a super expensive activity. You've got purchase of a car, you've got maintenance of a car, you've got gasoline, you've got insurance, okay, and you start registering it, okay, titling it. All of a sudden, these expenses, if you spend between $5,000 and $10,000 on a vehicle a year between gas and car payments, insurance and stuff, and multiply that for driving for 60 years, that's over $600,000. That's going to probably be more than what you pay for a home, more than your education. So anything that you can do to save money, to understand how to conserve, is going to hopefully make you a better driver, at least a little bit richer, that's for sure. In your readings, this was from the National Traffic Motor Vehicle Safety Act, and it just basically talks about guidelines trying to make programs and making our roads safer. And they talked about how certain features in vehicles like safety belts, shatterproof front windows, are all built into some of these laws, so that when cars are built, they have to meet certain standards, and that comes through the federal government coming up with these laws. I'm not going to go over facts because I just don't think you're going to remember these, but I just want you to understand, and I like the first one the best, actually. In a given year, the likelihood of you being involved in a crash is like 1 out of 9. Okay, so it's pretty good. I think all of you, if we had you answer the question, how many of you know of a parent or a sibling or an aunt, uncle, cousin that's been involved in a crash, a car crash, I think almost everybody, very few, would say that they don't know anybody. I think we all know somebody. So, but we always think it's not going to be us. And that's what we got to start thinking. It could be us. So if it is going to be us, what can we do to be a little bit safer? Okay. And like we said last night, we don't want anybody injured. We don't want people killed in automobiles. So we've got to make them safe, and we've got to drive safely. All right, I'm going to show you this thing about making roads safer. For those of you that drove today, I had 5 of you drive. I took you through the back roads of Durham and Lee, back in towards Dover, to see how you would handle some of these country roads with windy, sharp turns and hills. It's very easy for a new driver not to maintain speed or good position. So I try to evaluate your driving skill your first time out by taking you out to some of these country roads. So in this video, what you're going to see is that not all these roads are safe. Some of these roads need to have like trees cut down, guardrails put up, make roads wider, put in lights, put in a whole bunch of different things to make things safer. So we're going to see really how dangerous some roads can actually be.
site of a fatal accident.
This tree is going to be struck again and again and again. This pole has obvious signs of vehicle impact.
We're at the location of a serious accident.
The driver lost control of the vehicle.
Mother and two small children.
Wrapped around this utility pole.
Left-hand guardrail that will steer a car. Outdated as of 25 years ago. Ridge columns right along the edge of the roadway on both sides.
Highway safety ought to be a priority.
The tendency is to put back what was there.
As a highway engineer, you should do anything you can to reduce the severity of an accident.
This location may seem harmless to drivers that use it every day, when in fact it can be deadly and is loaded with roadside hazards. For example, the large tree located just inches off the edge of the pavement. The utility pole on the outside of the curve. Moving down the road a bit, an unprotected guardrail end, which when struck can be deadly and penetrate into vehicles that lose control and come into contact with it. And over here is another large tree located just about 1.5 feet off the edge of the pavement, and in fact was the site of a fatal crash just last year.
Each year in the United States, we have a large number of deaths and serious injuries resulting from single vehicle crashes into roadside obstacles or roadside hazards. This has been a problem that's been with us for a long time, and it continues to be one of the leading causes of death and serious injury in this country.
Before about 1965, or around that period of time, the highway engineering profession's primary mission was to make a safe roadway. There was also the feeling that once you got off that roadway, you're on your own. It's up to you to get out of the perilous situation. It's their job to provide a good roadway and your job to stay on it. About in the late 60s, the philosophy changed to, if a vehicle goes off the roadway, as a highway engineer, you should do anything you can possible to either get them back on the roadway or reduce the severity of an accident.
We learned a lot in the early days of the interstate system, how to make these roadside features less hazardous. And so today, the modern interstate system exemplifies the designs that eliminate most serious roadside hazards. And since we've built many miles of interstate system in the United States, the problem has shifted somewhat. But we still have a very serious problem on the many miles of secondary road that are still out there.
The most dangerous roads we have now are rural secondary roads. They have the highest fatality rates. There's where you have very little opportunity to recover if you run off the road.
Almost half of all serious roadside hazard crashes occur on curves. Curves to the left are especially hazardous. Signs and pavement markings can help guide drivers around curves, but even where curves are well delineated, drivers can still lose control. And putting signs on roadside hazards isn't the answer. We need to do a lot more than that.
One of the major fixed objects along our roadsides, and the one that accounts for probably more fatalities than any other single fixed object, are trees.
This is an example of the most common problem in the area of roadside hazards, which is trees near the edge of the pavement, especially on curves. On this curve, there are trees right up against the edge of the pavement, and compounding the problem here is a complete lack of protection against drivers striking the trees. The trees are directly in line with any vehicle that loses control around that curve. After trees, utility poles are the most frequently struck object in fatal roadside hazard crashes. Every year in the United States, over 1,000 people die in crashes with utility poles. On this pole, you can see the marking and the scarring that's obvious. This pole has been hit many times and is located in a way that will guarantee it will be hit again in the future if it stays here. The way to deal with this problem is also obvious. Utility poles can be set much further back away from the road, creating a clear zone. Utility lines can be buried underground, eliminating the use of poles altogether. And the use of breakaway utility poles is an option. It's appropriate to remove isolated trees that are located in dangerous locations. However, trees and poles are often located in groups, and when this is the case, it's often more appropriate to shield those objects through the use of a safety barrier.
Guardrails are the most widely used type of safety barrier, but they're not used often enough to keep cars away from trees and poles. They're very effective, but if guardrails aren't installed properly, they can become hazards in their own right. One problem can be that while they're keeping cars away from one obstacle, they can direct them right into another.
This guardrail has been placed in such a way that while it provides adequate protection in some areas, it actually leads vehicles directly into the base of a very large tree, which is very dangerous. The way to correct the situation is to extend the guardrail past all objects on the side of the road and only end or terminate once there's a safe place to do so.
We have here a guardrail that's supposed to be protecting you against the bridge rail, but in actuality it runs you right into the bridge rail if you hit the guardrail. And as we can see, that bridge rail has been hit many, many times. The proper design is to have the guardrail out in front of this bridge rail and attached to it, such that you have a smooth transition from one to the other.
Another problem is the end of the guardrail itself, which can become a hazard if it isn't installed properly.
We're at the location of a serious accident with a mother and two small children that went off the left side of the roadway and hit this guardrail. This end treatment, which is like a knife edge, will impale a car, and that's what happened in this accident. The car hit the end of the guardrail, and it actually went up through the firewall into the passenger compartment of this car between two small children. This kind of guardrail is outdated as of 25 years ago, but still there's a lot of these around the country, thousands and thousands of them. Most modern guardrails have a type of end treatment that prevents the impalement of a car.
Burying the end of a guardrail can prevent impalement, but it's not the best answer because it can create a different hazard.
The solution to this problem is to make the post breakaway and make it essentially an energy attenuator.
This is one of the worst examples of roadside hazards that we've seen. Bridge piers like this one are often located very close to the edge of the pavement. They're especially deadly because of their large size and unyielding nature. At this site, a 36-year-old father of two small children died when his car veered off the road and struck an exposed bridge pier. We don't have to wait for somebody to die at a site like this to improve it. What we had at the site before was an exposed bridge pier that was extremely dangerous. Any vehicle running off the road coming into contact with that area of the bridge could result in devastating injuries. In place now is a properly designed guardrail that's attached to the exterior of the bridge pier. Along with that guardrail is a proper and safe end treatment that allows for a gradual deceleration of vehicles that run off the road.
Where bridge supports and other rigid structures can't be safely separated from traffic with guardrails, an alternative is energy-absorbing devices. Crash cushions and other devices can do an effective job of slowing vehicles down gradually. These concepts are simple. Wherever possible, provide a clear roadside that allows drivers a chance to regain control if they leave the road. If a clear zone isn't possible, make sure posts are designed to break away in a crash. And any remaining hazards should be separated from traffic by properly installed guardrails or other energy-absorbing barriers.
We at the federal level ran a highway safety improvement program. Under that program, we provided funds to the states to improve high accident locations. That turned out to be a very effective program.
Fixing roadside hazards is important because it can prevent a momentary loss of control or a minor crash from becoming serious or life-threatening. Engineering safer roads must become an even more important part of the national strategy to reduce deaths and injuries, now that speed limits and travel speeds have increased.
There are funds available for renovating and improving highways. It's very important that some of those funds be allocated to fixing the roadside hazard problem. Obviously, we can't fix them all at once. Therefore, it's very important for highway departments to have sensible priority schemes so that they can decide which ones they should fix first.
Roads are built by civil engineers, and civil engineers are civil servants, and they tend to do what the public wants. The only way you can get the state and local government to enhance safety on the roadway systems is for the public to want that enhanced safety. And I think they do.
Next time you're out on a country road, take a closer look. If you see hazards that shouldn't be there, especially on curves where loss of control is most common, ask yourself why. The answer is that for too long, solving this problem hasn't been a high enough priority. Raise the priority and help make safer roads.
So hopefully you're going to take a look at roads a little bit differently now. That roads are unsafe. Some of them are worse than others. Part of what I want you to do, and this is not on the list here, this is kind of one of the group activities that you're going to have to do on your own tonight when I let you go in a few minutes, is I want you to find an area that you either have driven or you know of that's unsafe, and what makes it unsafe, and what would you do to correct the problem. Let me show you here something, and this is what I want you to do is go to Google. I think it's Google Earth. It's where you can take a snapshot. This is a overhead view of where I live. The big house right there on the bottom right-hand corner, I live right to the left of it. So that big, huge, it's like an apartment building for older residents. But if you take a look at the circle, okay, where the street is, and there's a little circle right there, that is a very extremely dangerous area where people that are coming from the road from the right, so you see the road off, if you take, where the roadway is, and you're moving a car towards the left now, towards that circle, if you were to make a left-hand turn, right before you make a left-hand turn where those three parked cars are, those three parked cars block that oncoming vehicle. You can see at the top of the picture in the middle, there's a car coming down towards the circle. If you are coming from the right, okay, and going around that circle, you would not see that car to the last second. That is very, very dangerous. They should have a lower speed limit. They should have a flashing light, and maybe make those parking spots illegal to be parked in so you could see a little bit better. Another situation that I found that's unsafe, let's see if I can find it here. Let me move this around. Okay, here's another situation that's here in Durham. This is 155 up near the Madbury Police Department. So if you take a look at the road that is on the bottom right-hand corner and that's going up straight to 155, making a left there, and you can see where the trees are. That's where the ball fields in Moorhemet Elementary is going to be way over to the left. So this road is very dangerous too. They should probably widen the road, have a traffic light, whether it be blinking or a regular traffic light would make that a much safer area. So what I want you to do for your homework is to go to Google Earth, take a snapshot like I did there, and explain what makes it unsafe, and send that to me. Some of you still haven't done Chapter 1. Do that. Do the pretest. Some of you still haven't done that. Remember, the remote Facebook page is not my Facebook page. All right? That's two separate things. You have to type in the search bar, Toll Driving School Remote Driver's Ed class. Then that will take you to where everything's going to be listed. Chapter 4 and 5, which will start tomorrow. We're going to finish this up a little bit. I'm still a little bit behind. Remember, your password for the pretest is February 2021. I'll leave that up there. So we're going to get into knowing your vehicle manual transmission tomorrow, and we're going to finish up on the HTS a little bit about some unsafe road areas, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The other thing that I want to do now is, if you can drive tomorrow anytime except 4 o'clock, all right, and I'll drive at 5 if someone wants to drive at 5. but I want you to text me and let me know that you can drive, and I'll text you back that you've got that time, and we'll try to build a schedule for tomorrow. Snow's going to be late Thursday night into Friday, so we'll have to see what Friday looks like, but I'd like to also schedule. And tomorrow in class, we're going to have to schedule out all vacation. And I'm going to have a form that I'm going to send out to you, probably via text message, that I'm going to want you to fill out and send it back to me. That way I can see what you've got for availability, and I'll contact you and put you into some of these time slots. But we'll talk more about that tomorrow. So if you've got any questions, this is time for you to text me questions as well as your availability to drive. But that's it for tonight. So have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow, and hopefully a lot of you will be able to drive. I just saw Sarah just text me. Sarah, you got 5 o'clock. I'm going to put you in. Okay, that's great. So have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow.